the idea that financial independence is all about some number on your account statement, or even worse, that you don't qualify because of where you started out. That's just not true. It's not about some well-kept secret of the wealthy. It's about finding the right information and knowing how to apply it. On the Get Ready for the Future show, we're answering your questions so you can start making real financial change today. The journey to true financial independence begins right here, and it starts with you.
Another week of continuing our mission to help people discover, protect, and share true financial independence. Welcome in to the Get Ready for the Future show, coming to you from the 6th floor of 3 Financial Center in West Little Rock, Arkansas. My name is Scott Inman. GenWealth co-founder John Shrewsbury here with me to go over some questions from listeners and viewers today. We're glad to have you along however you get the show, whether you're watching online as we deliver it live on a Wednesday morning, or you're catching the podcast version, the radio version. We know we've got different ways for you to absorb it. And good questions today, John, and it's all over, running the gamut, really. I mean, we've got a question about inheriting an IRA. We've got a question about being too conservative as you get closer to retirement, which may sound like an obvious choice for people, but maybe not. We're going to talk about that. And also got a question in here about a blended family and how to deal with the estate planning ramifications of that. So good stuff in there today.
Yeah, lots of different topics on financial planning and helping people to achieve financial independence. So let's jump in.
We will. We'll go right to Rachel from Stuttgart for question number 1. I'm 62 and just started collecting Social Security, but I also inherited a small IRA from my sister. What are the tax implications of that inheritance? Well, an inheritance and Social Security in the same year can sound like a blessing, but it could come with a tax sting. So let's walk through it here. As you know, the Secure Act, or as you may not know, but we're going to tell you, the Secure Act of 2019, this is beginning to be not so recent developments anymore. You know, we've been telling people in client meeting rooms about the inherited IRA rule changes, and on this show, as a matter of fact, for quite some time now. It went into effect in 2020 that the inherited IRA rules changed. So let's talk about what they used to be first. In the past, when you inherited an IRA from someone who had passed away, you were required to take a required minimum distribution based on your life expectancy from that IRA. Now, you didn't have to do that. You could take it all at once, but not technically advisable in most cases, because that is all going to be taxed. Every dollar in most cases, in every case I can think about, inheriting an IRA, when you pull it out, it is received as ordinary income tax. So it's stacked on top of your other income and taxable at those rates. So if it is a pretty sizable IRA, and Rachel says it's a small one, we don't know exactly what that means. Her definition of small matters here. We'd need to know that. But if you took out $100,000 and you made $100,000 in any given year, then you've just made $200,000. So you probably wouldn't want to take it all out at once. That stretch rule that used to be available to recipients of inherited IRAs was eliminated with the Secure Act of 2019 and replaced, John, with a 10-year rule.
In certain cases,
yes,
the 10-year rule does apply, which means that they basically took a lifetime of income and compressed it to 10 years. Here is the net effect of that. If you kind of think about the normal scenario, someone who is in their, let's say, 70s or 80s probably has children that are about to hit their peak earning years. And so those children inherit this IRA. Under the old rules, they could have stretched that out over the course of the children's lifetime and not really had a big tax hit as a result of the required minimum distributions. But now those required minimum distributions for those children are compressed into a 10-year time period. Inherit $1 million IRA, theoretically, you take $100,000 a year out of it to get it all out in 10 years, which is what the law prescribes. Well, you just up that person's taxable income by $100,000, which likely thrust them into a higher tax bracket. I think Congress knew exactly what they were doing. I think they were finding a way to grab more money, and they did this. And I'm really shocked, Scott, that there hasn't been a hue and cry from the public about this. I think because it hits people just sort of a little bit at a time as people pass away, as opposed to it all kind of occurring at once. I think if it had all occurred at once and everybody had experienced it at one time, there might have been a change in this legislation.
Yeah.
But I think it was very insidious what happened here. But that is the consequence of the Secure Act.
Yeah, tax grab, big tax grab for sure. And that $100,000 a year over 10 years is assuming no growth, right? So when you think about investing and how much it could really be a tax bomb. But the good news here for Rachel could be is that she did not receive it from her parent. So why does that matter? She received the small IRA inheritance from her sister. There are some exceptions to the 10-year rule, and one of them is if the recipient of the inherited IRA is 10 years younger or less than the decedent, then the 10-year rule does not apply. So assuming that you don't have a sister more than 10 years older than you, Rachel, you may not have to worry about the 10-year rule and can continue to take RMDs from the IRA. But the bigger question for you individually is, how does it fit into your overall plan? Do you need to create some additional income on top of Social Security? And then another piece to this, as we turn the page on it, John, is it could impact her Social Security taxation as well.
Yeah, I think Rachel's initial question was, what are the tax implications of inheritance? And that really does depend on your situation. If all you have is Social Security and have this small IRA, and even if you have to take the required minimum distributions over 10 years, it likely is not going to impact you from a Social Security taxation standpoint. There are certain thresholds where, Social Security is not taxed if you are at a certain threshold, but then it could bump up to 50% or even as high as 85%. But given the fact that this is a small IRA and you're going to take required distributions either over your life expectancy or 10 years, depending on your age gap between you and your sister, then we figure that there is slim to no impact on you, Rachel, but we would have to sit down and understand and know what your tax situation is. It is very, very ill-advised, Scott, to really just kind of go off of the limited information that we have here to talk about the tax implications, because taxes really are this Rubik's Cube of different things. And if certain conditions are here, then it affects something else. So I'm going to hedge a little bit on this and basically just say I don't think there's going to be any or a very small tax impact on Rachel in this case, but we would recommend you sit down with someone who really does know about taxes and can look at your situation and determine what your tax liability actually would be.
And kind of pulling back to more of the 30,000-foot view with this inherited IRA too, I think if you're listening and you heard Rachel's question and you think about, well, someday I might be inheriting some money from my parents and I might have that 10-year rule in effect to apply to me, I think it really does point out the need to get some guidance from a financial advisor and create an overall plan. I think about that 10-year rule and an exemption. We found out about it really early on when that law was passed in 2019 and went into effect in 2020. I actually had a client who received an inherited IRA that was not very small from his sister, who had unfortunately passed away in a car accident. And he really didn't know much about the 10-year rule, and we were just learning about it because it had been in effect for less than a year. And we found that exemption for him so that he didn't have to pull all of that money out over a 10-year period. And he does have to take an RMD now, and that was actually pushed back as well for a couple of years. The IRS was not clear on that language, but now you are required to take an RMD from that inherited IRA, and we've gotten him in and his wife and built an overall plan for that money. They're still in their work life. Rachel is 62 and collecting Social Security, but for this couple, they are still working, probably going to work for 5 to 10 more years. So what we were able to do is send them that RMD, withhold the taxation from it so that they didn't have to get hammered when they filed their tax return, and then they were able to use those funds to contribute to Roth IRAs for both both spouses, maxing out those Roth IRAs, John, and now they'll have tax-free income when they do get to retirement. So there's some repurposing there through that RMD, and it just highlights for me the need for planning to go along with what your decisions are about inherited IRAs.
Yeah, that's a great example of excellent financial planning. And I think in Rachel's case, the bigger question is, what do you need to do with the money? Yeah. Obviously it's come from your sister. Do you want to do something to honor your sister? Whatever that might be, you could certainly do that. If you need those funds to become more financially stable yourself, then maybe you need to pay off debt with that money and put yourself in a better position, especially if you are limited on your income only to Social Security. Not much debt can be sustained from a Social Security check. So I think that in either case, Scott, there is maybe some planning that needs to be done, some questions that need to be answered. And certainly, Rachel, if you want to reach out to us, we will do our best to try to help you with that.
Yep, you can do that toll free, 866-653-PLAN. It's 866-653-7526. And if you have any questions about inherited IRA rules, we're going to get a lot of those questions over the upcoming years. I just read earlier this week that the great wealth transfer, as it is called, is expected to be $84 trillion over the next decade and a half or so, that's going to be transferred from the baby boomer generation and the silent generation to Gen X and beyond over the next decade and a half or so. And a large piece of that $84 trillion is going to be in IRAs and qualified plans.
Yeah, big time change there. Scott, I want to talk a little bit about an event we've got coming up. And I know when we say October 4th, that sounds in August like it's eons away. Yeah. But it will be here.
A dozen or so degrees cooler away.
Yes, absolutely. But it will be here before you know it. And this is actually intended for our business owners in the audience. We've got a great opportunity for you to come to Built to Endure. It is a business owners summit. It is programmed for business owners. It is going to be taking place at the Delta Hotel right down the road from our West Little Rock office on Saturday, October 4th, 9 a.m. until noon. We've got a whole bevy of speakers that are going to be there talking about various issues that deal with small business, like benefits. We've got a benefits expert coming in to talk about, is it affordable for you to offer benefits to your employees? Is it advisable for you to do that? Is it something that you have questions about? There'll be some give and take on that. There's things about business strategy, all of that type of thing. And then keynote speaker for the event is Houston Nutt, the former Arkansas Razorback football coach. And you may go, well, what does he know about business? He's a football coach, but he knows about teams. Yeah. He knows about rallying teams from even the depths of despair and going and winning again. I think that there's great parallel between, and that's why people play sports, is they learn all of these life lessons in sports that apply to business later. And you see a lot of people who are good athletes go on to be great business people because they can apply those lessons. And so Houston Nutt is the best person that we know in the state of Arkansas that could come and share with us some of the secrets of really managing a team, rallying a team, motivating a team, helping to manage a team through desperation at times. And so it's all going to be happening on October 4th at the Delta Hotel.
When we talked to Houston earlier this week, kind of getting ready for the event, as he was driving, we don't even know where he was, but he was driving his car, and we were kind of walking through what the event was going to look like. And you asked me to kind of give him a little idea, because I'm going to do the questions with him. I'm going to have it's going to be a Q&A style. The thing I think about with him is, look at changing culture. How often is that talked about when a coaching change takes place?
Right.
In the locker room, the culture of a team that's losing, what has to be done to change the culture, institute a new culture. Houston Nutt did that. As far as his motivational skills, I think about that as well. That's primary, relatable to business ownership, and then managing talent, right? I mean, that's a big piece. Get him in the right places to be successful.
Right.
That's obviously something that applies to him as a football coach. So we look forward to a question and answer session and the keynote address there with Houston Nutt. If you'd like to register for that event, again, it's Saturday, October 4th, from 9 a.m. until noon at the Delta Hotel in Little Rock. Just go to our website, getreadyforthefuture.com/ Endure. And you can sign up there and register for the event and hear Houston Nutt and get some, especially if you're a business owner, you can get some insight there as far as strategies, as John mentioned, benefits. Expert will be there as well, so hope you'll join us on that Saturday.
And we'll have breakfast that morning,
Yep.
so a good time, and we'll have you out by noon, and it will be a quick but very informative time. And if you are running a business, if you are dealing with people, if you are trying to figure out this whole thing of business, we're going to have good stuff for you. I will assure you, you will walk away with actionable items that you can take back to your business and plug in and help you to be successful in your business. And hopefully your business will help you be successful in your journey toward financial independence.
All right, next question on the Get Ready for the Future show today is from Jamie via text message. We're 60 and worried we're too conservative with our investments. We've got $850,000, but very little in stocks. Is it too late to adjust our risk? Never too late, Jamie. Hey, too little risk can be just as dangerous as too much. So here's how to find the right balance in the final stretch. So you're 60. We're going to assume the retirement timeline or horizon is closing in pretty soon, 5-10 years away, probably no more than 10. It is not too late to adjust risk, but we certainly would advise building a plan first, because here's the deal. You don't want to just have a random allocation to X% stock, or worse yet, choose some individual stocks and think you're going to get some bounce off of that because you have been too conservative for too long and you want to go all in on the growth side. It is advisable first to sit down with a financial advisor, one who does financial planning like we do here at GenWealth, and build out your retirement income plan. That's right. We're talking about investments, but ultimately these investments and your $850,000 and however much you watching or listening have saved is going to be meant, more than likely, to provide you with income in retirement. So your investment strategy, John, has to overlay your income plan.
It absolutely does. It has to track that income plan, or else you're going to have a mismatch there. And when you have a mismatch, things are not going to work the way that you think they are. See, here's the key, Scott. You have 3 risks in retirement that you haven't had to deal with for the most part during your accumulation years. Those risks are timing risk, inflation risk, and longevity risk. They're called the 3 big risks of retirement. So let's focus first on inflation and longevity. Both of these risks are best addressed with equities. Equities and real estate have been the only 2 asset classes historically that have outpaced inflation over a long period of time. And the fact is that even though you are approaching retirement, you still have likely a very long life to live, and you have to account for inflation. Your plan has to be able to be adjusted to increase your income over time. You wouldn't take a 20-year job and say, you know what, I don't need a raise during that time. That would be foolish. And you have to have a retirement plan that will adjust with you. A well-diversified, professionally managed portfolio, not stock picks from your buddies down at the coffee shop or something like that. That's where you want to be, is in a well-diversified, professionally managed equity portfolio. And it should be things that are very well-diversified, like ETFs and mutual funds. I'm not big on individual stocks because I think you have to be right on those individual stocks, and there's a lot of concentration of risk in that. So you diversify those equity holdings so you are not exposed to the risk of 1 or 2 or a handful of companies. Historically, as I said, equities have done it as far as helping to keep pace for inflation, but equities need a long-term perspective to be effective. And so when you have that long-term perspective, you have to fill in the gap, if you will, between now and the time that that long-term actually arrives. And you do that with fixed income and balanced portfolios.
Yeah, we'd be glad to take a look at that portfolio and see if it needs adjustment towards the equity bent. Because to John's point, on the time horizon, you need to believe in equities in retirement, but you need to have them positioned for the long term. Statistically, and again, this is based on past performance, not indicative of future results, but there's about a 60 to 70% chance of a positive return on stocks in any given 1-year period. So if you're taking income in that year, you don't want to base all of your investments into equities and count on a positive return. But the odds increase over time to nearly 100% if you're talking about a 15 to 20 year period. So the longer they cook, the better off it's going to be. But to John's point, avoiding sequence risk. So you talked about longevity and you talked about inflation and the need to believe in equities. The reverse is true on the fixed income, the balanced portfolio. The lower risk, more conservative investments need to be positioned for money today, because what sequence risk is just what we talked about. If you had money in equities and you are withdrawing a certain amount per month, per year, and the market crashed and you went down 20% and your $100,000 is now worth $80,000, that can, over a very short period of time, really accelerate the depletion of your assets. And you don't want to have all of it in equities for that reason. You just almost coined a new GenWealth phrase. I thought you were going Johnny Cochran on me. The longer they cook, the better they look. That's where I thought you were going. Anyway, but to your point, Scott, yes, long-term equities, that's the place for stocks and investments in the stock market. Now, let's put that in perspective as far as less risk is concerned, because that's where fixed income comes into play. You need to have that fixed income liquid, paying a dividend or paying interest for you. And what you're really looking for there is the return of your money, as Will Rogers would say, and not necessarily a return on your money, although you do want to get a return on it, but you want that money to be available to you because it acts as the buffer, the time buffer, to allow those equities to grow. Yeah. So once again, back to the original answer to this question, you need to build a plan first. And at GenWealth, we build retirement income plans, and we use software that shows us to the dollar what needs to go into the fixed income bucket, what needs to go into the balance bucket, the more moderate investment strategy, and what needs to go into the growth bucket that is built for the long term. So your $850,000 could get pieced out over a very specific amount of time so that you know what you're spending and when. Controlling what you sell and when you sell it are key to having a successful retirement. If you'd like to get started on that plan, you can give us a call toll-free, 866-653-PLAN, 866-653-7526. And Jamie, your question is the question of the week. And we want to send you a free Get Ready for the Future Show tumbler for being the question of the week. If you'll email us, send it to show@getreadyforthefuture.com and claim it, it will be yours. Our next question on the show is from Andrea in Benton. I'm 45, remarried, and have kids from a previous marriage. How do I structure my estate plan so everyone's protected fairly? Blended families and estate planning, it is not just emotional, it's obviously legal. So here's how we would suggest protecting the people you love without creating conflict. And I am a member of a blended family. I remarried about 3 years ago, and my wife has 2 children. I have 4 children. So this hits home for me.
Yeah.
It is very complicated. And I would say, first of all, it may not be static. You may not make your decision right now and stick with it, because if you're recently remarried, it may take some time, Andrea, to really figure out how you want to do that. Now, I'm not suggesting don't act or drag your feet. You need to have something in place, but the reality here is it is likely going to evolve. Your method or your desire of how your assets are distributed after you pass away and vice versa your spouse is probably going to evolve over time. But fair is a very subjective word, especially when it comes to dividing up assets. So you've got to decide what your intentions are first. Do you wish for your assets or a bigger piece of your assets to go to your biological children, or are you okay with it being spread evenly between stepchildren and biological children? I think that's the first thing you got to answer.
Well, and I think that embedded in Andrea's question is an interesting point. She said she has kids from a previous marriage. And the question is, how do I structure my estate plan so everyone's protected fairly? So you could have a situation where the spouse of Andrea, she could leave money to that spouse, but the spouse at that particular point in time is the owner of that money, and they are under no obligation under just a beneficiary designation to share that with her children.
Right.
And so you may have to go in and say, okay, I'm going to give a portion to my children and a portion to my spouse. Now, obviously, the percentages and the portions and all of that type of thing is very subjective. It is totally your call, Andrea, what you do with that, because they are your assets. If we're talking about your IRA account or your 401k or whatever the case may be. Now, jointly held assets, that's a completely different thing, and assets that were accumulated after the marriage may be handled differently than the others. So a lot of this really is going to turn on how you feel and how your spouse feels about this. Obviously, if there were assets that you brought to the marriage, there is a case for passing those down to your children in a bigger portion maybe than to your spouse. But in assets that are accumulated during the marriage, that it may be a completely different thing.
Yeah, we've talked about that too. Sarah and I have talked about what we brought to the table and then what we have done together. And certainly it is much cleaner to consider everything from the point that you get married forward to be his and hers divided equally, because you built it, even if what didn't seem like one made more money than the other and one saved more than the other, it is a team effort. And I think that's a pretty clean cut. But it is not as clean when you talk about assets that you had prior to the marriage. And it is difficult to think about, John's point about the primary beneficiary. You do have to think about, do you want to take care of your spouse, even though your spouse would not be obligated to pass that on to the next generation? A trust could certainly help out in this situation to have some specific language there and maybe even be the primary beneficiary of those accounts so that you can divide it the way you want to divide it. As John was mentioned, maybe some to the spouse, some to your kids. Don't know how old your kids are, but that's going to matter. My kids are all 3 out of the 4 are adult age, so that matters. If they're still underage, that might not be the way to go now, but might be the way to go later.
Let's not miss the element of life insurance here. If you're sitting here and going, well, I've only got so much, and it's kind of hard to spread that around to everybody. You could certainly, if you can qualify for a life insurance policy, you could certainly take out a life insurance policy and then make a beneficiary designation on that life insurance policy. That increases the amount of money that would be left to whoever you want it to go to, but it does increase the bounty, if you will. I guess that would be the way to call it, is that, you now have more that you can work with and more that you can take care of people and feel good about. And so you can do that with what I would call discounted dollars. You don't have to go and make every dollar in that life insurance policy. You're leveraging the insurance company's benefit for a smaller premium, and you pay that premium and you get a death benefit from that if you happen to pass away while that policy is in force, then tax-free, that money goes to your kids or to your spouse or to whoever you want it to go to. I think that there is a great benefit, Scott, at this particular point in time for somebody like Andrea to actually sit down with a financial planner and to sit down with an insurance agent and to sit down with a estate planning person and work together to create the type of plan that she feels good about. Because if you're trying to spread assets, a limited number of assets over this group and that group, it can get pretty perplexing. And I think that's a formula for potentially disappointment.
Yeah, we can help in that arena too. We now offer estate planning services and have an in-house estate planning specialist, so you can reach out and book your consultation today. But again, to John's point, have multiple professionals in the room building that financial plan, the estate plan, and looking at insurance if that is something that is of interest as well. You can start the process by calling toll-free 866-653-PLAN. That's 866-653-7526. We've got time for just one more question, and it's going to have to be fast. Melissa from Fayetteville, running out of time here. We're both retiring in 2 years, and we're not sure whether to move our 401ks to IRAs or leave them where they are. What's the difference? Rolling over a 401k sounds simple, but it could change your fees, your flexibility, and your future. So here is what to consider. So, Melissa, If you are both retiring in 2 years, we don't know exactly how old you are, but if you are over 59 and a half, these options may be available to you now, depending on your employer plan's rules. But otherwise, when you retire, it is certainly up for a possibility, because you have, when you sever your service, either leave to go to a new job or retire, you do have 4 options with what to do with your 401k. John, you want to start us off?
Sure. You could leave it where it's at. You could certainly do that. The 401k doesn't make you take it. You can leave it where it's at and take distributions from that. Although I will say that 401ks are great accumulation vehicles. They are not real great distribution vehicles. And you're working with a big company that doesn't really offer an awful lot of planning or anything of that nature. It's just an investment source that you can pull money from. You could transfer it to a new company plan, but if you're retiring, that's probably not an option. You could roll it to a 401k, from a 401k to an IRA account. That is a tax-free transaction. It goes from one qualified plan to the other, and you don't pay any taxes on that transfer. But you do need to understand what you're rolling it to. What is funding that IRA? What is the investment strategy? What is the plan with that money? What are you putting into that IRA that is going to facilitate your plan? If you don't have a plan, then you're just throwing it at an investment, and that's never a really good idea to do. You want to have a strategy in place to create regular, predictable, dependable, lifetime income for you that has the opportunity to be inflation adjusted. That's what we do at the Ready to Retire process at GenWealth. We have that plan and can sit down and help you to understand what the possibilities are. You could also spend that money, which we don't advise to do because we talked about that a little bit earlier, Scott. That involves a big tax bill.
Yeah, you don't want to cash it out even if you're just going to plan it in your savings account. You want it to either stay in a 401k or roll to an IRA because it has that tax deferral and you only pay when you make a withdrawal. So cashing out is not likely your best option there. So we talked about in the front of that, the fees and the flexibility. You know, when you think about the fees, you want to look at that too. Fees aren't the end all and beat all when it comes to your decision-making process, but they do matter. Oftentimes, not always the case, the 401k is probably going to win out with lower fees, but you're also going it alone. And you're also restricted to the funds that are in the 401k. You have no choice beyond that. So when you move to the flexibility piece, the IRA gives you a lot more options. I say the investment universe is opened up to you. And of course, you don't want to go that alone either, but you can get the consultation of a financial advisor to help you choose the investments and really more importantly, the overall investment strategy that you need when it comes to your retirement, which you said is happening in 2 years.
Scott, I can't emphasize enough that the plan is the foundation of everything when it comes to the retirement income that you're wanting to build. You have your plan first, and then you overlay investments on that plan. If you start with the investments, then you've got everything backwards, and then you're going to have dysfunction as far as your retirement planning is concerned.
But as is the case on all of the other questions that we had today, Melissa, don't go it alone. Don't make a decision on whether to leave your 401k there or to roll it to an IRA without building a plan, as John said, with a financial advisor. Getting guidance is key. We say it every week almost on this show, but retirement's a complex issue. It's a complex process, and you don't want to go it alone because there are no do-overs.
That's right. And I think that's my final thought, Scott, as I heard the bell just a moment ago. And that is that, you know, there's a lot of advice floating around out there. All you have to do is get online on any of the social media platforms, and there's always somebody, you know, jaw-jacking about something that they supposedly know about money, and they want to give you just maybe 10 or 15 seconds of information and say, that's all you need to know. Well, that's bull. I will just tell you, money is complex. Money is something that you deal with every day. It is essential to your life. And for you to take advice from, you know, just somebody on TikTok or X or something like that is just ill-advised. Having a written financial plan and having a relationship with a financial advisor that understands you, understands the vagaries of your life, understands what you're trying to accomplish, and can help you comport your financial plan to get to those goals, I think that is the formula and the key for success.
My final thought is a quick reminder that we talked about earlier. The Built to Endure Business Owners Summit is coming up. For business owners,
about that.
Yep. Houston Nutt is our keynote speaker, former Razorback coach Houston Nutt. It's Saturday, October 4th at the Delta Hotel in Little Rock. To register, go to the website getreadyforthefuture.com/endure. We hope to see you there on Saturday, October 4th. And we are out of time. We did have to hustle through that fourth question, but we've got more questions coming up next week. We want to hear from you. Text or leave a voicemail to this number, 501-381-5228, 501-381-5228. We'll see you next time.
The GenWealth financial team
Mics
is
are muted.
available to you 24/7 at info@getreadyforthefuture.com or call our offices at 866-653-PLAN. That's 866-653-7526. You should personally consult a financial advisor before making any investment, and no strategy can assure success. Securities offered through
Cameras
LPL
out.
Financial. Member FINRA SIPC. Investment advice offered through Independent Advisor Alliance. Independent Advisor Alliance and GenWealth Financial Advisors are separate entities from LPL Financial.